The dust cloud rising from the horizon made Faith Summers' heart pound in her chest as she stood on the weathered porch of her late father's ranch. The year was 1875, and at 22, she had never expected to find herself the sole proprietor of the struggling Summers Crossing Ranch in the New Mexico territory. The telegram that had arrived just 1 month prior had changed everything. Marriage arranged. Stop. Thomas Xavier arriving September. Stop. He will save the ranch. Stop. Faith smoothed her simple blue calico dress and adjusted the lace collar that felt too tight around her neck. Her father's deathbed arrangement with an old war buddy meant she was to marry a man she'd never met, a man she assumed would be as old as her father would have been. 60, perhaps even older. A grizzled veteran with weather-beaten skin and yellowing teeth. A good man, her father had assured her, but still a stranger. The rider was close enough now that she could make out the silhouette of a single horseman on a magnificent black stallion. Her mouth went dry. This was it. This was the moment her life would change forever. She straightened her back and lifted her chin, determined to face her future with dignity, even if it meant being tied to an old man for the rest of her days. The rider slowed his horse as he approached the ranch gate, and Faith caught her breath. He sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders blocking the setting sun. As he drew closer, Faith's eyes widened. This couldn't be Thomas Xavier. This man was young, perhaps 28 or 30 at most. His strong jawline was covered with a light stubble rather than the long white beard she had imagined. He dismounted with the ease of a man who had spent his life in the saddle, removed his hat, and revealed thick dark hair with a slight wave. His eyes, piercing blue even from a distance, locked with hers as he approached the porch. "Miss Summers." His voice was deep, with a slight drawl that suggested he'd spent time in Texas. "Yes," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Faith Summers." He climbed the steps and stood before her, towering a good head taller. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, not from age, but from squinting against the harsh western sun. "Thomas Xavier, madam. Though most folks call me Ty." He extended his hand, and she took it hesitantly. "You seem surprised." Faith swallowed hard. I was expecting." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "An old man." She nodded, embarrassed by her assumption. His smile widened, revealing straight white teeth. "It's me, young and yours, if you'll have me." Faith felt her cheeks flush hot with embarrassment, and something else she couldn't quite name. "Please, Mr. Xavier, come inside. You must be tired from your journey." "Ty," he corrected gently. "If we're to be married, you might as well use my name." Faith nodded and led him into the modest ranch house. The main room served as both parlor and dining area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. She had spent the morning cleaning, polishing the few pieces of quality furniture that remained, and preparing a stew that now simmered on the cookstove. "Your father spoke highly of this place," Ty said, glancing around the room. "Said it had potential." Faith's hands twisted in her skirt. "It did once. But after the drought 2 years ago, and then the cattle fever last spring, we lost more than half our herd. The hands left when Pa couldn't pay them. I've been managing with just old Ezra, who's been with us since I was a child." Ty nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Your father and mine served together in the Mexican-American War. They saved each other's lives more times than either could count. When my father passed last year, I found letters your father had written asking for help. My father was too ill to respond, but I knew what needed to be done." "So you came out of obligation," Faith said, unable to keep the disappointment from her voice. Ty shook his head. "I came because I wanted to. Because two good men made a pact, yes, but also because I was looking for a new start myself." He hesitated. "I understand this is not what you expected. If you wish to call off the arrangement." "No," Faith interrupted, surprising herself with her quick response. "No, the ranch needs saving. I can't do it alone." A shadow crossed Ty's face, but he nodded. "Then I'll do everything in my power to help." Faith served the stew, and they ate mostly in silence, stealing glances at each other across the table. He was handsome, she couldn't deny that, with features that spoke of strength and character. His hands were calloused and strong, but he handled his utensils with unexpected grace. "Tomorrow I'll ride the property," Ty said as he finished his meal. "Get a feel for what needs doing first." "The south pasture fencing needs repair," Faith offered, "and the creek that runs through the property has nearly dried up. We need to figure out why." Ty nodded. "We'll start there." When it came time to retire for the night, Faith showed him to her father's old room. Standing in the doorway, an awkward silence fell between them. The preacher comes through town every third Sunday, Faith said finally. He'll be here in 10 days. For the wedding, Ty said, his expression unreadable. Yes. Faith looked down at her hands. Unless you'd prefer to wait longer, to get to know each other better. Ty's gaze was steady. I think we should stick to the plan. The sooner we're officially partners in this venture, the better for the ranch. But Faith, he said her name softly, causing her to look up. I won't rush you in other ways. Marriage is just a piece of paper until two people decide to make it more. Relief flooded through her. Thank you for understanding. He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes, causing small crinkles at the corners. Get some rest. We have work to do tomorrow. The next morning, Faith woke at dawn to find Ty already in the barn, saddling 2 horses. He had dressed in work clothes, faded denims, a blue cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing muscular forearms, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. Hope you don't mind, he said, nodding toward the second horse. Thought you might want to show me around yourself. Faith appreciated the gesture. This was her home, her land, and he was acknowledging that. I'd like that. They rode side by side across the pastures. Faith pointed out the creek bed, now barely a trickle, and the broken fencing. She showed him the best grazing lands and the areas where the soil had grown too poor to support much vegetation. All the while, she was acutely aware of his presence beside her, solid, confident, yet not overbearing. At the far edge of the property, they stopped on a rise that overlooked the valley. In the distance, the mountains rose purple against the clear blue sky. It's beautiful land, Ty said. It was my mother's family's originally, Faith told him. They were some of the first settlers here. My father came through with the army, met my mother in town, and never left. She smiled at the memory. He used to say she lassoed him faster than he could rope a wild Mustang. Ty laughed, a warm sound that seemed to fill the space between them. Sounds like they had a good marriage. They did. Faith's smile faded. When she died of the fever 10 years ago, something in Pa died too. He kept going for my sake, but the ranch started to suffer. He just didn't have the heart for it anymore. Ty studied her face. And you? Do you have the heart for it? This land is in my blood, she answered without hesitation. I won't give up on it. He nodded, seeming satisfied with her answer. Then we'll bring it back together. Over the next week, they fell into a routine. Ty would rise before dawn and handle the morning chores, then work on the most pressing repairs. Faith managed the house, cooked their meals, and helped with whatever task she could. Old Ezra, a weathered black man who had been freed during the war and stayed on with the Summers family out of loyalty, taught Ty the peculiarities of the land and weather patterns. They spoke little during meals, but the silence became less awkward and more companionable. Faith found herself watching Ty when he wasn't looking, the way his hands moved with purpose, the thoughtful expression he wore when considering a problem, the rare but genuine smile that transformed his serious face. One evening, after a particularly hard day's work repairing the damaged well pump, Ty came in later than usual. Faith had kept his dinner warm, and as he washed up at the basin on the back porch, she couldn't help but notice the weariness in his shoulders. You're pushing yourself too hard, she said, placing his plate on the table. He sat down heavily. There's a lot to do before winter. Yes, but you won't be any good to the ranch if you work yourself into exhaustion. He looked up, surprised by her concern. I suppose you're right. After he ate, instead of immediately retiring as had become his habit, he lingered at the table. Faith brought out a chess set that had belonged to her grandfather. Do you play? She asked. My father taught me. Ty's eyes lit up at the sight of the carved pieces. Though I haven't played in years. They set up the board, and as they played, Faith found herself relaxing. Ty was a thoughtful player, considering each move carefully, but not without a sense of humor when she captured his pieces. You're quite good, he said after she checkmated him in their second game. Pa and I played often during the winter months when there wasn't much else to do. Tell me more about him, Ty said, leaning back in his chair. My father spoke of him with such respect, but I knew little of the man himself. Faith found herself sharing stories of her father, his love of music, his terrible singing voice that he inflicted on the cattle anyway, his patient teaching as she learned to ride and rope. He sounds like he was a good father, Ty said softly. He was. Faith felt tears prick her eyes. He did his best after Mother died. I think he arranged this marriage because he was worried about leaving me alone. He wanted to know I'd be taken care of. Ty reached across the table and briefly touched her hand. I promise you, Faith, I'll honor his wishes. I'll take care of you and this ranch. The simple touch of his hand on hers sent an unexpected warmth through her body. She looked up and found his blue eyes watching her intently. For a moment, she thought he might say more, but instead, he stood and began to put away the chess pieces. "It's getting late," he said, "and tomorrow we need to ride into town for supplies." The next day, they made the 2-hour journey to the small town of Willow Creek. Faith wore her best dress, a modest green cotton with a matching bonnet. Ty, too, had dressed in his better clothes, a clean white shirt, dark vest, and his least worn denims. He had shaved that morning, and Faith caught herself admiring the clean line of his jaw. Willow Creek consisted of one main street with the essential businesses: general store, blacksmith, saloon, a small hotel, and the sheriff's office. As they tied their horses outside the general store, Faith noticed the curious glances from townspeople. "Word travels fast in small towns," she murmured. "Everyone knows you're here to marry me." Ty offered his arm as they walked into the store. "Let them talk. We have nothing to hide." Mr. Patterson, the storekeeper, greeted them with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Miss Summers, and this must be your intended. We've heard so much about you, Mr. Xavier. Have you now?" Ty's voice held a note of amusement. "All good, I hope." "Oh, of course. Everyone's just pleased as punch that the Summers place will be back in working order. Fine piece of land, that." As they gathered their supplies, Faith was aware of several women entering the store on flimsy pretexts, their curious eyes taking in every detail of Ty's appearance. She couldn't blame them. He cut an impressive figure with his tall frame and confident bearing. Something possessive stirred within her that she hadn't expected to feel. "We'll need more salt pork," she said, perhaps a bit more loudly than necessary, placing her hand on Ty's arm. "And coffee. We're nearly out." Ty glanced down at her hand on his arm, a small smile playing at his lips. "Whatever you think we need, darling." The endearment, spoken for the benefit of their audience, nonetheless sent a flutter through Faith's stomach. As they left the store with their purchases, a commotion down the street caught their attention. A group of rough-looking men had emerged from the saloon, and one was shouting at a young woman who was trying to hurry past. "That's Florence Miller," Faith whispered. "The schoolteacher. And those men are from the Carter outfit. They've been causing trouble since they moved onto land north of here." The man grabbed Florence's arm, and she cried out in alarm. Without hesitation, Ty handed Faith the packages he was carrying and strode toward the confrontation. "Excuse me," he called, his voice carrying down the street. "I believe the lady would prefer to be on her way." The man turned, swaying slightly from drink despite the early hour. "Mind your own business, stranger." Ty stepped between Florence and the drunk cowboy. When a man manhandles a woman in the middle of the street, it becomes everyone's business. The cowboy lunged forward, but Ty sidestepped easily. The man's momentum carried him past Ty, who simply stuck out his foot. The cowboy sprawled face first in the dirt, prompting laughter from onlookers. The man's companions, for equally rough-looking cowboys, stepped forward menacingly. "That's enough." Sheriff Morris had emerged from his office, rifle in hand. "Carter boys, you've been warned about causing trouble in my town. Get back to your ranch before I decide you need to cool off in my jail." The cowboys muttered threats, but helped their fallen comrade to his feet and retreated toward their horses. The leader, brushing dirt from his clothes, pointed at Ty. "This ain't over, mister. Nobody makes a fool of Bert Carter." Sheriff Morris approached as the Carter gang rode out of town. "You must be Thomas Xavier. Heard you were arriving to marry Faith here." He extended his hand, which Ty shook firmly. "Good to meet you. Those boys have been a thorn in my side since Old Man Carter bought the North Range last year. His sons think they own the territory." "Thank you for your help, Mr. Xavier," Florence said, her face flushed with embarrassment and gratitude. "Please call me Ty, and I'm glad I could assist." On the ride home, Faith was quiet, thinking about the incident in town. "Are you worried about the Carter boys?" Ty asked, reading her expression. "They've caused trouble before. Cattle missing, water rights disputed. Pa stood up to them, but after he got sick, they took advantage." Ty finished for her. "Well, that stops now." Faith looked at him, studying his profile against the afternoon sky. "You weren't afraid. 5 against 1, and you didn't hesitate." Ty shrugged. "I've faced worse odds." "Where?" "In the war." He was silent for a moment. "After. I worked as a marshal in the Dakota Territory for a few years. Learned that most bullies back down when someone stands up to them." Faith absorbed this new information about the man she was to marry. "Is that why you came here? You were looking for something quieter?" Ty's expression grew distant. I was looking for something real. Something worth building. He glanced at her. Your father's letters to mine. They spoke of you with such pride. Said you had your mother's beauty and your grandmother's spirit. That any man would be lucky to call you wife. Faith felt her cheeks warm. He was biased. Maybe. But he wasn't wrong. Ty urged his horse forward, ending the conversation and leaving Faith to wonder at the meaning behind his words. The Sunday of their wedding arrived clear and bright. Faith stood before the small mirror in her bedroom, adjusting the white lace collar on her best blue dress. She had considered wearing her mother's wedding gown, but it felt wrong somehow, as if she would be pretending this marriage was something it wasn't. A knock at her door startled her. Faith, may I come in? Ty's voice came through the wood. She opened the door to find him dressed in a dark suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. His hair was neatly combed, and he'd trimmed his stubble to a clean line along his jaw. He looked handsome enough to make her heart skip. You look beautiful, he said, his eyes taking in her appearance. Thank you. She smoothed her skirt nervously. You clean up well yourself. He smiled, then grew serious. Before we do this, I wanted to speak with you privately. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. This is a deed to the ranch, with both our names on it. I had it drawn up in town yesterday. Whatever happens between us, the land will always be half yours. Faith took the paper with trembling hands. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here to build something with you. He hesitated. If you're having second thoughts. No, Faith said quickly. No second thoughts. I'm ready. The ceremony was simple, held in the front parlor with old Ezra and a few neighbors as witnesses. Reverend Williams spoke of duty, partnership, and respect, carefully avoiding too many mentions of love and deference to the arranged nature of the union. When it came time for the vows, Ty's voice was steady and sure. Faith's trembled slightly, but she met his eyes as she promised to honor and cherish him. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Ty leaned down and placed a gentle, brief kiss on her lips there first. The warmth of it lingered long after he pulled away. The small gathering shared a meal Faith had prepared the day before, and by late afternoon, the last guest had departed. Faith busied herself with cleaning up while Ty saw the Reverend off. When he returned to the house, an awkward silence fell between them. They were married now, alone in what was officially their home. I've moved my things to the main bedroom, Ty said finally. But I've made up a bed for myself in the small room off the kitchen. I meant what I said before. I won't rush you. Faith felt a complex mix of relief and disappointment. Thank you. That's considerate. Later that night, lying in her bed, though she slept in it alone, Faith thought about the man sleeping down the hall. Her husband. The word felt strange. 3 weeks ago, she hadn't known he existed. Now they were bound together by law and circumstance. She wondered if that would ever be enough. The days following their wedding brought little change to their routine, except that Ty now introduced Faith as my wife when they encountered neighbors or townspeople. Each time he said it, she felt a small thrill, followed by the sobering reminder that theirs was a marriage of convenience. A week after the wedding, Faith was in the kitchen garden harvesting late vegetables when she heard riders approaching. She stood, shading her eyes against the sun, and her stomach dropped when she recognized Bert Carter and 3 of his brothers. She hurried to the barn where Ty was repairing tack. The Carter boys are here. Ty's expression hardened. He placed the leather he'd been working on aside and stood. Stay behind me. They walked together to the front of the house as the riders approached. Bert Carter sat tall in his saddle, his face still showing faint bruising from his fall in town. Well, if it isn't the newlyweds, he called, his voice carrying a mocking edge. Thought we'd come pay our respects. That's neighborly of you. Ty replied, his tone neutral but his stance alert. Though most folks bring a gift, not an armed escort. The men laughed, but there was no humor in it. Bert dismounted, followed by his brothers. They didn't tie their horses, a clear indication they didn't intend to stay long. We've got a small problem, Xavier, Bert said, walking closer. See, before your arrival, Miss Summers here, he gave Faith a look that made her skin crawl, was in talks with my pa about selling this place. That's a lie, Faith said sharply. I never, your pa then, Bert interrupted. Before he passed, he knew this place was too much for a woman alone. My pa made him an offer. Ty's voice remained steady. Well, she's not alone now, and the ranch isn't for sale. Bert spat on the ground. That's unfortunate, because we need this land. Our herd is growing, and we need the water rights that come with this property. Our water barely supports our own small herd. Faith protested. Bert shrugged. That's your problem. Our offer stands $5,000 for the whole spread. That's generous. The property is worth 3 times that, Ty said. Maybe once. Not now. Bert's eyes narrowed. You're new here, Xavier. You don't understand how things work. This territory belongs to the Carters now. Sheriff Morris only has authority in town. Is that a threat? Ty's hand moved subtly toward his hip, where Faith knew he wore a revolver under his vest. Just stating facts. Bert gestured to his brothers, and they mounted up. Before swinging into his own saddle, he looked at Faith. Think about it, Mrs. Xavier. Money spends a lot better than pride. His gaze shifted to Ty. And some men aren't worth dying for, especially when the ink's barely dry on the marriage certificate. They rode off, kicking up dust that settled slowly in the afternoon heat. They'll be back, Faith said quietly. Ty nodded. I know, but next time, we'll be ready. That night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Faith found herself studying Ty's profile. You knew trouble would come with this ranch. Is it worth it to you? He turned to her, his blue eyes serious in the fading light. Is it worth it to you? This is my home, she replied simply. Then it's worth it. He reached over and took her hand, his calloused thumb stroking across her knuckles. Faith, I need to tell you something. When I agreed to come here, to honor my father's promise to yours, I thought I was doing a duty. But these past weeks... He paused, seeming to search for words. I find myself thinking less about obligation and more about you. About us. Faith's heart quickened. What are you saying, Ty? I'm saying that I'm glad it was you I found at the end of that long ride. That every day, I find new reasons to be grateful for this arrangement. His fingers tightened around hers. I'm saying that I'm beginning to care for you in ways that have nothing to do with promises or property. Faith felt tears spring to her eyes. I feel the same, she whispered. I was so afraid of marrying a stranger, but now I'm afraid of something else entirely. What's that? Of caring too much. Of losing you to men like the Carters who think they can take whatever they want. Ty brought her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her palm. You won't lose me. I promise you that. That night, for the first time, Faith asked Ty to stay with her in their bedroom. Their coming together was gentle and reverent, a physical expression of the feelings growing between them. Afterward, as she lay in his arms, Faith felt a sense of rightness that she had never expected to find in this arranged marriage. I think I'm falling in love with you, she murmured against his chest. He stroked her hair, his voice warm in the darkness. I think I've already fallen. The next morning, they were awakened by the sound of gunshots. Ty was out of bed in an instant, pulling on his trousers and grabbing his revolver. Stay here, he ordered, but Faith was already reaching for her robe. This is my home too. I won't hide. They rushed outside to find old Ezra in the yard, rifle in hand. Several of their cattle lay dead in the nearest pasture, and the fence had been cut in multiple places. It was the Carter boys, Ezra said grimly. Rode through before dawn. I got a shot off, might have winged one of them, but they was too many and too fast. Ty's face was thunderous. This ends now. What are you going to do? Faith asked, fear gripping her heart. First, I'm going to town to speak with Sheriff Morris. Then I'm going to visit some of the neighboring ranches. The Carters can't be making friends with tactics like these. Faith grabbed his arm. Not alone. We'll go together. The ride to town was tense, both of them scanning the horizon for any sign of the Carter gang. Sheriff Morris listened to their account with a deepening frown. I'm sorry, folks, but without witnesses, it's your word against theirs. And the Carters have been throwing money around town, buying influence. So you'll do nothing? Faith asked incredulously. The sheriff had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't say that. I'll ride out there, have a word. But don't expect much. As they left the sheriff's office, a voice called out to them. Mr. and Mrs. Xavier. They turned to see Florence Miller, the schoolteacher, hurrying toward them. I heard what happened at your ranch. The Carter boys were in the saloon last night, bragging about their plans. Did anyone else hear them? Ty asked urgently. Florence nodded. Half the town, but most are too afraid to speak against them. She hesitated. My brother Frank has a spread next to yours. He's organizing some of the smaller ranchers. They're meeting tonight at his place. You should come. That evening, Faith and Ty rode to the Miller Ranch, where they found a dozen grim-faced men gathered in the barn. Frank Miller, a stocky man with the same earnest expression as his sister, greeted them warmly. The Carters have been pushing all of us, he explained. Cutting fences, diverting water, threatening hands. Individually, none of us can stand against them. But together, plans were made. The ranchers would form patrols, watching each other's property in shifts. Any trouble would bring a swift, unified response. Ty was nominated to coordinate the effort, his experience as a marshal making him the natural choice. As they rode home under a canopy of stars, Faith felt both fear and hope battling within her. "Do you think it will work?" she asked. "It has to," Ty replied. "Men like the Carters only understand strength. Alone, we're vulnerable. Together, we have a chance." For the next week, the strategy seemed to be working. The Carters made no more raids, though they were spotted near boundary lines several times, always retreating when they saw the armed patrols. Faith began to hope that perhaps the worst was over. Then came the night of the fire. They were awakened by old Ezra pounding on their door. The barn's burning. They rushed outside to find the structure engulfed in flames. The horses were screaming inside. Without hesitation, Ty ran toward the inferno, Faith right behind him. Together, they managed to open the stalls and drive the panicked animals outside, but the barn itself was beyond saving. As they stood watching it burn, covered in soot and gasping for breath, Ty pulled Faith close. "Are you all right?" She nodded against his chest, her eyes fixed on the destruction. "They won't stop, will they?" "No," Ty said grimly. "But neither will we." The next day, riders from neighboring ranches arrived to help clear the debris and begin rebuilding. Women brought food, men brought tools and lumber, and by sunset, the framework of a new barn stood where ashes had been that morning. Faith watched Ty working alongside the others, his shirt sticking to his back with sweat, his face streaked with dirt. He caught her watching and smiled, and in that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that she loved this man not because of arrangement or obligation, but because of who he was. As the last of the neighbors departed, thanking them for the meal Faith had provided, Frank Miller stayed behind. "Carter and his boys were in town today," he said quietly, "drinking heavily and making threats. Word is they plan to drive you out for good." Ty's expression hardened. "Let them try." That night, they made preparations. Old Ezra took up position in the hayloft of the partially rebuilt barn, rifle at the ready. Ty and Faith remained in the house, windows darkened, watching the road. Shortly after midnight, they spotted the riders, at least 10 of them, approaching slowly from the north. "Stay inside," Ty told Faith, checking his revolver. She shook her head, holding up her father's old shotgun. "This is our home. I'll defend it alongside you." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Together, then, they positioned themselves on the porch, the darkness concealing them from the approaching riders. Ty had sent word to the neighboring ranches earlier, but help might not arrive in time. The Carter gang stopped about 50 yards from the house. Bert's voice carried clearly through the night air. "Xavier, we know you're in there. Come out and face what's coming to you. Like you faced us, Bert." In the middle of the night, setting fire to a barn with animals inside, Ty called back, "That's not the work of a man. That's the work of a coward." Bert's angry shout was followed by gunfire. Bullets splintered the wood of the porch railing as Faith and Ty ducked for cover. "On my signal, aim for the ground in front of them," Ty whispered. "We want to scare them off, not kill anyone if we can help it." Faith nodded, her hands steady on the shotgun despite her racing heart. Ty fired first, his shot kicking up dirt just before the lead horse. Faith followed with the shotgun, the blast causing several horses to rear in panic. From the barn, old Ezra's rifle cracked, adding to the confusion. The Carter boys returned fire wildly, most shots going wide in the darkness. Ty and Faith maintained their disciplined approach, aiming to frighten rather than hit the riders. Suddenly, shouts came from behind the Carter gang. Lanterns appeared on the road, illuminating at least 20 riders approaching fast. "That'll be Frank and the others," Ty said, relief evident in his voice. Caught between the defending fire from the ranch and the approaching reinforcements, the Carter gang's resolve broke. They wheeled their horses and fled into the night, Bert's curses fading with distance. Frank Miller rode up to the porch, a dozen men behind him. "Everyone all right here?" Ty nodded, his arm around Faith's shoulders. "Thanks to you all." "No need for thanks," Frank replied. "This is what neighbors do." And the Carters needed to learn that lesson. The next morning, Sheriff Morris arrived with surprising news. Bert Carter took a bullet in the shoulder last night. His pa brought him to the doctor in town, raising holy hell about ambushes and murder attempts. "It was self-defense," Faith protested. "They came to our property with guns drawn." The sheriff held up a hand. "I know that. And so does everyone in town who's watched the Carters' behavior these past months. Old man Carter's been trying to buy up the whole territory, thinking money would let him do as he pleased. He smiled slightly, but it seems he's finally met his match. He's loading up his family and heading back to Texas. Says this territory's gotten too unfriendly for his taste. Relief washed over Faith. They're really leaving? Train tickets purchased for tomorrow. And good riddance, I say. After the sheriff left, Ty pulled Faith into his arms. It's over, he murmured into her hair. We did it, she said, her voice thick with emotion. We saved the ranch. We saved more than that. Ty pulled back to look into her eyes. We built something here, Faith. Something real. I love you, she said simply. Not because my father arranged it, or because you saved the ranch. I love you because of who you are. And I love you, he replied, stroking her cheek. The moment I saw you standing on this porch, looking at me with those wary eyes, I knew I'd found something worth fighting for. He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, a promise of all the days to come. 1 year later, Faith stood on that same porch, watching the horizon. The ranch had flourished under their joint care. The cattle herd was growing again, the fences were mended, and a new barn stood proud and sturdy. Most precious of all was the small bundle in her arms, their 2-month-old daughter, Margaret, named for Faith's mother. The sound of hoofbeats made her smile. Ty appeared, riding in from checking the north pasture. He dismounted with the same easy grace she had first noticed, but now there was a lightness to him that hadn't been there before. Happiness, she realized. The same happiness that filled her own heart. He climbed the steps and kissed her, then pressed his lips gently to their daughter's forehead. How are my girls today? He asked, his voice tender. Missing you, Faith replied. Even though you were only gone a few hours. He chuckled, wrapping an arm around her waist. Well, I'm home now, and I'm not going anywhere. Together, they watched the sunset paint the land in gold and crimson, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. The arrangement that had brought them together had blossomed into something neither could have imagined, a love as vast and enduring as the western sky above them.